Okay. All right. If we're recording, she can edit.
Mom and Pop recovery hour. Here we are.
Pop recovery hour.
Hey, Pop, what's going on in your life?
I'm getting older. I'm feeling it. Let's see. How do we start this?
So,
Hey, YouTube. I hate that.
so the topic du jour today is on
Boundaries.
boundaries.
Saying no.
Saying no.
Saying yes.
Saying
You have
yes.
to say yes and you have to say no, but you have to do it with a boundary.
And a period. No is a sentence, right? No,
A period?
period.
Yeah.
Yes, period. We don't have to explain.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest problems I think that I know I've had, but I see people have, is that I want to say no to something and then want to explain why.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes we really don't need to have to explain why.
No.
It can just be no.
It could be because you don't want to do it.
Yes.
But see, in addiction, what happens is the person typically who's an addict also tends to be a people pleaser because of their history of abuse or control by loved ones. So they don't know how to say yes or no without a boundary because they're trying to always please somebody else. So then when you say no, you feel guilty, or when you say yes to something, you feel guilty when you really meant to say the opposite. And then you say yes, and you didn't really want to go on that trip to Ohio or wherever to help somebody because you had these other things you had planned, and immediately those things go by the wayside because you said yes to this other thing. But why don't you have a boundary?
I think a lot of addicts grow up in families with no boundaries, and there's a lot of intrusion into their space.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many ways that can happen that kind of actually get cultivated very young.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're always used to somebody, telling you what you need to eat, what you need to read, where you need to go, and there's just this control that's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no individuation. There's no separating out and becoming their own
Mm-hmm.
being. So they're always following and tracking, engaging what other people's like. They're almost like chameleons. It's almost like a way of growing up as a chameleon, where you take on the color of the person.
So you can belong.
So you can belong.
fit in. You can
Yes.
be part of this, because if you're not, yeah. And families cultivate that idea of the boundaryless existence because the parents, when the children are young, are negligent. They're verbally abusive or emotionally abusive. I see a lot of it that comes from negligence. They're neglected. So a child is neglected, and then they grow up thinking that they're not good enough or they're not enough. And they are enough, but they're not enough. And so then they have to be doing something to fit in, to be accepted. And then when the parent comes and says, do this for me, or do that, and then it becomes like a duty of the child when it's inappropriate for that to happen. So yeah, it's kind of easy to have that evolve into that.
I think another thing that I've seen too before is when children are basically there to fulfill the unmet needs of the parents, unmet needs of loneliness, or the relationship between the parents is not getting along, so they're side taking, and the child gets, not to get too deep into psychotherapy here, but the child gets triangularized.
Why would you do that?
The child gets triangularized into this, this dyad with the parents, and so the child is brought in to diffuse the anger or whatever's going on between the two. So the child never really develops any sense of self. The self is basically, I will be what you want me to be, and so that I can make everybody happy, And so that's where that people pleasing just, finds water and sunlight and grows into that, so that when they're finally, trying to recover from that, it's not easy, especially when you walk into the 12-step rooms where you have to get a sponsor, and then there begins the journey of people pleasing again.
Because the first thing they tell you, the sponsor says, is you have to do everything I tell you. So it's right. So you can't say no. You're the addict, and I'm your sponsor. Okay, well you have to call me every morning at 7.
Right.
And your response is, in the morning? Yes, every morning. If you can't call me every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, I can't work with you. But I don't even get up then. I work a day shift, or I work an evening shift. I don't get up. I don't care.
You don't want
There's
this
no
bad
boundary.
enough. I love this one. The
you
shame. You don't want this bad enough. Okay, go ahead. Go out and do it your way. How's your way working for you, by the way?
Yeah.
That's another good one. How's your way
Yeah.
working for you?
Yeah. See, and so
So it's that mind. Is that
boundary. A boundary is appropriate at times, but then to throw an addict into a situation where they can't have a boundary, because that's the opposite of what we're saying. You have to have boundaries, and now we're saying when you go into AA or NA, you can't have boundaries.
so it's very confusing, right? And the
It's
hope is,
confusing me.
and I'll tell you what the hope is that you don't get somebody who that feeds their need. They're an untreated control freak, right?
You're talking about the sponsor?
Yes.
Oh,
Sponsor.
yeah.
So you hope that you don't get someone like that, because I've certainly been around. You have too. We've seen that kind of thing happen. So I would, what would be some things that you would want to know about the sponsor before you even chose a sponsor? I mean, this is kind of an interesting thing to sort of look at, so that you.
Well, they ever done it before?
That would be a good one, right?
How long are they in recovery?
Good too.
Yeah. What's their drug of choice? Because you can be an AA, but if you got a multiple poly addict or something, it's like what's your drug of choice?
I would say too, oftentimes what I've seen a lot with women is that they choose a woman. The woman is a mother and has children and a husband, and then they choose a sponsor that has none of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, disconnect that sort of happens, especially when you have the sponsor saying, well, I don't care that you have to, be home with your kids. You spend all this time away from your kids. Now you need to
Yeah,
put
you
your
really
program
don't
first.
You don't want to get sober.
Right.
Yeah, because you're not coming to yeah. Okay.
Because you have kids to take care of. I don't get the kids thing. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that happens.
Yeah. All right. So, but when the person says, "I want you to," what did I say before? Oh, using your powers for good, not evil. So, if the boundary thing, setting a boundary, in some instances can be bad. Some instances it can be good. It depends on if it's abusive. So if you're doing it and the result is bad, it's a control effort that's negative, that would be for evil, right? That's you're using your powers for evil. So that would be a sponsor using them for evil. If it's for good, the boundary can be put in place, and it's to get you to a place of healing or sobriety or whatever. So that's using your powers for good, right? Okay. So you have to be able to figure out, is somebody hitting me with their powers for good or for evil? But when you're a whacked out of your brain addict, you don't really understand kind of what's going on. So how do you know?
Well, one of the things I think that I like hearing is when I had a sponsor that would say, it's all about choice, and I'm going to make a suggestion to you.
Wow.
And this is what I'm going to tell you. So it's your choice if you want to follow my suggestion or not. That kind of gives the choice back, because when we see people with addictions, there's trauma, and then oftentimes what trauma has done to the person is it's took away choice.
Yeah.
So when you're working with someone who is offering, look, first of all, you got to come to this conclusion: how's your way working for you? And this is the nice way of saying, the gentle way. And if it's not, can you say that it's working or not working? Well, it's not really working. Well, I'd like to try a different way with you, but what I'm going to offer you is suggestions, and it's going to be your choice if you want to follow them. I would suggest strongly, and that's how I used to talk to my sponsees, I would suggest strongly that you listen to what I'm saying here, because I am trying to help you with your emotional sobriety, because that's the next piece that happens, right? We get off the substances, and now we have to really work with this emotional component of our sobriety, right? Mm-hmm. And basically, I feel like the sponsor is the one that really helps to establish the trust and help that person to begin to become more, what am I trying to say? I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I don't know.
I had one of those
you
moments. Oh my goodness.
Boundaries for good, boundaries for bad,
yes.
But you have to have boundaries. People pleasing means no boundaries. And that means that the people coming at you are going to exploit that a lot of times because they sense that you don't have a boundary. But boundaries for good or boundaries for bad. How do you have, so we talked about from the perspective of the addict, then the perspective of the sponsor, and then the perspective of the person who is neither addict nor sponsor, but a loved one or whatever. And coming from an origin of a culture of boundarylessness. Is that a word, boundarylessness?
Yes, I like it.
So, but then there's another one. There's the parent who has the addict in their home, and they're protecting them. They've given them safe harbor in their home, and it's their child, but they're an addict and they're not working. They're not going to school. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting around using, smoking pot, drinking beer, or shooting heroin or whatever, and they're living in the basement. And the parents are now being held captive by the addict who, but the parents don't have boundaries, which is why they're living in the basement, smoking pot and playing video games all day long.
And it's usually that person that calls you about their adult
The
child.
parent?
The parent.
Yeah, it's the
right.
parent.
It's the parent calls and says, what can you do? What can I do about this? I don't know how to do this. Well, and then what do you do? What is your response? Because
I don't make appointments for third parties or through loved ones. So you're going to have your adult child who's living in your house call me. And how many times do you think the addict would call me?
Maybe 0.
No, they'll call.
They'll call.
Yeah, I'd say like 50%. Yeah, maybe 50%. And the others they don't call. And then the parent calls me and says, "Did Susie call you?" I'm like, "No." Oh, and then right, so how does the parent have a boundary though with the child addict who's an adult who's 25? How do you do that?
Well, I think you right from your response
Mm-hmm.
is actually helping them to begin to look at their part and establish some boundaries. Because when you respond like this,
Mm-hmm.
they have to look at themselves. Because don't you ask them eventually, like, what are you doing for yourself?
Oh, that comes later.
That comes later. Okay.
Oh, that comes later because see the next thing they do is go, I knew you were going to say that, or I know he or she, the addict, needs to do that. I know. I'm just calling because and then you could enter in reason, like they're out of state, they're busy doing something else, but they're not working, not going to school, they're not doing anything.
Right.
But there's always they're preoccupied with something. But they could call on the cell phone that you're paying for. Oh yeah, I know. I know I should do that. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So the boundaries are with parents of adult children who are addicts. Really is one that they have to. The term I use is you got to be part of the recovery, not part of the addiction. So you can't be part of the problem. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. One or the other. There's no gray area. You're one or the other. Pick one. And by that point, they've picked part of the problem. They just think they're part of the solution because they're keeping their adult living in the basement where they're safe. They're safe.
And one thing we realize when we stop pleasing people, people are not pleased.
Ooh, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think of that one yourself?
No.
Oh.
But in the case of the parents with the children, oftentimes we'll find the parents don't want to upset their adult child, and they want to please them, and
right.
So when they start to create these kind of boundaries, then comes the work.
So say it again. What was it?
When we stop pleasing people, people are not pleased.
Are not pleased. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. We should put that on the wall.
I think we should.
Yeah, that's good. Not pleased. So really not having boundaries creates an environment for a much higher level of destruction in an attempt to kind of placate people or keep them from being, upset, aggressive, or getting in trouble. They're trying to be a people pleaser. So you're creating a much higher level of destruction and chaos potential and reality in that than if you just said no. But saying no does something that's very troubling to people. And it doesn't matter who the loved one is, because if you say no to somebody, what you're saying is, I'm not going to do what you want. And then the risk is that the addict, it will upset the relationship. So what they're really doing is trying not to upset the relationship.
Yes.
By killing the other person.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're killing the other person because they're using their drug of choice and they're going to die eventually. So you're not upsetting them, but you're killing them. Maybe that's a little hard. Is that harsh?
No, because I've actually seen, I'm sorry to say, but I've seen people, young adults die.
Well, I have too.
Both of us.
Yeah.
So,
but they may not have, but I have. You have.
I have, yes.
So that's not. Yeah, it's real. That's real. So how do you set a boundary? How do you?
So I often think that and what I'm seeing, in fact, it's really interesting today. I had a woman say to me that her husband and her want to go into therapy over their adult 35-year-old daughter to figure out how to deal with her.
35. How old
Yes.
is this? How old is this other person?
These are the parents.
60s or 70s?
Yes, they're 60s and 70s. Yes.
Wow.
And so, because she cannot hold a job, she's got a personality disorder, she's an addict, she's and so and she has and it's upsetting them so much, particularly the mother. And I just was like, look, there comes a point where you have got to take your focus off of her, the adult child, and put it back on you, and it's time for you to go and get the support that you need. To it doesn't matter what's going on with her anymore, you've got to work on what's happening with you. So I always point out Al-Anon, and it is a great start there, and to go in open-minded, to go in and listen, and then begin to hear what other parents are doing, because often in Al-Anon, a lot of it is either partner or parent or children, and you will see how other people are learning how to keep the focus on themselves, because they're the professionals that really can help you to learn how to develop this detachment with love, and allow people the dignity to not recover or to have their own consequences of their behavior, and to step back, and just and not I heard a story once, and I'll just show this funny story. This woman.
I like stories.
This is a funny story.
It's a good story.
It's a good story.
Okay.
This woman was it was in a meeting, an Al-Anon meeting. She was saying she was so angry at her son because her son was standing at the bottom of the stairs. She's at the top of the stairs, and she's yelling at him because he came home and he's been drinking and driving. And she was yelling, and then she kind of lunged forward and she fell down the stairs. Now he's just doing what addicts do, right? And she's falling down the stairs, almost killing herself. And that is like the best metaphor. Yeah. I mean, when she told me this, like she started kind of laughing, like this is what they're doing what they're doing, twirling, yet we are falling over, the ones that are living with these people and falling downstairs.
Wow. Yeah.
Essentially.
That's good.
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
So I feel like the ways that people can help with addiction is to get themselves into their own program, take care of themselves. And
there are places, and I don't know, around the country, but like, for example, at Father Martin's Ashley, which is a treatment center in Havre de Grace, Maryland, they have a great program that'll for families. Most treatment centers have a family weekend, and we'll do an educational piece. Father Martin's does it, and you don't even have to have anybody in their program for you as a fan. Like if you and I were going to go as a family, you can go to their family weekend educational thing, and nobody has to be at Father Martin's, but you can still go and take advantage of that, where you can really get that education from the professionals who are like, these are treating professionals, and they know exactly what they're talking about. So learn about addiction, learn about what's going on, and spend 2 8-hour days getting that orientation into what is recovery about, and what is addiction about, and how does this affect me as a family member. You can access those programs without having somebody in their treatment center. I'm sure there's probably other ones around the country that do that. And
one of the interesting things is the journey of for myself was I went into AA, and when I was there, going through the steps, the sponsoring, all that different things, it was then that I began to uncover my Al-Anon side, so to speak, that I had such a very severe codependent part of myself, and that I found that I needed, and what started to happen, a lot of people in the program in AA used to say to me, "You really need to go to Al-Anon," and I'm like, "What? I'm already in one program. I'm not going to another program," because what I was sharing in the meetings was about everybody else.
Yeah.
I wasn't sharing about myself. So there's another clue.
Dependency.
You need a clue to find out if that's happening to you. That's when you might want to say, and my sponsor said to me, you need to go to Al-Anon to understand the multidimensional aspects of addiction.
Yeah.
You know, because which came first? You grew up, Heather, with an alcoholic mother. Which came first? And you became an alcoholic. Where is the, and how, and so the fact was, when I was in Al-Anon for the first time, I didn't even know that my mother was an alcoholic until all of a sudden I realized when I was listening to people that she just didn't present it like what I thought an alcoholic should present like. She was more of a binger, but she definitely had that, and I was very affected by the inconsistent parenting that happened. So, you know, I had all of my sponsees when I was sponsoring go to Al-Anon. It was a very important part of their journey.
Wow.
To understand
That's good.
their codependency.
That's a good
Yes.
idea. Yeah. So have boundaries. Learn how to put a boundary in place. Get the support to understand how to establish safe boundaries and healthy boundaries that you may not have had in the past with the addict, and find ways to really offer help to the addict without enabling them and creating that codependent environment, and forcing them into a position where they're losing that support, that safe harbor, which will move them towards recovery. It's painful, but it's what's necessary to get there.
And then in your own self, in finding a sponsor and then dealing with your own codependency, begin to listen to how people talk to you. Begin to listen and look at how you're responding to people. Is your automatic go-to is, I want to make this person happy, I'm just going to, I'm not going to rock the boat? Or can you listen to the person tell you what to do and then realize that you have choices and that these are suggestions, and this is when you begin to become more whole and integrated in the recovery process. So because that's the ultimate goal. That's the 12th step. In the end, you want to have these principles. You want to have principles. You want to have values. You want to practice them in all your affairs. But you want to have a sense of yourself. You know.
And it's really important to make sure that you're doing the Al-Anon thing, so you can go through that ever important, all important 4th step.
Yes.
Fearless searching moral inventory of your character defects. Oh man.
And do one program at a time, honestly. Go through one program, finish that program, and then, because I didn't get to Al-Anon until about 3 years. And a lot of people in the program in Al-Anon will tell you they're coming from the AA side, they're in there at 25 years because they don't understand why their relationships are not good.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
What is going on? There's a factor, it's me, and there's something I'm doing. And it's
an evolutionary thing.
Yes.
It's not a the fix. I got the fix. It's an evolutionary thing. We evolve into that recovery and health. Yeah. Wow, that was great.
That was good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, happy journeys on this wonderful trail, this wonderful road, right?
That ever up and down road.
Yes, but we're all here together, and we're not alone. We're never alone. So thank you for tuning in.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Got all the.
What do you think? Did it record?
How long do you think that was?